After the Atlanta Regionals, and especially the finals with the Bidoof Wars, a lot of people are worried about the current format and what they want to play, whether they should just pick up Dragapult, what to counter Dragapult and Gardevoir with, which are probably going to be the top two decks of the format. Maybe Goldengo will also be in there. And I want to talk about why, even though the deck inherently got a lot worse, I think Miraidon will be a wonderful pick going forward in the Pokemon TCG meta. So first off, how did Miraidon get weaker? Well, it lost basically a lot of its supporting Pokemon as well as one big attacker. You had Raikou, which of course dealt solid damage for 2 energy with its Lightning Rondo and got the extra card draw, which was very nice. Especially you would typically run the Pikachu build to give you your Terra Pokemon so you can have your Area 0. You could have big benches and do a lot of damage for basically no energy investment. You also lost Raichu, which was at the very least your second or third, like either the late game closer attacker on a big EX Pokemon with its 60 per energy on every Pokemon that you could build up over the game, especially with a Magneton getting 3 energy from your discard pile. It was pretty strong. Or it could be the second attacker after, let's say, an Iron Hands gets an attack off, you switch in to your Raichu, get a huge damage, and then you rebuild up a third Pokemon at the end of the game. However, honestly, those two weren't the biggest losses. It was mostly the other supporting cards. Lumineon V being able to search out your boss's orders or Arven's if you don't get it. You lost a Forest Sealstone is the V-Star, so you can't just search for a double colorless energy to make your Iron Hands consistent. By the way, we also lost double colorless energy because, again, that all rotated in the April F block rotation. The last two pieces we lost were Hisui and Heavy Ball, which allowed you to just be more consistent because you could search your prizes for all your, 13 different basic Pokemon or whatever you were running. And a card that definitely came back into Miraidon was that Rotom V in case you had to go first. I personally like going first because you get those 3 extra cards. You get the extra manual attachment on your Iron Hands because of your 1 energy attachment per turn, and I felt like it just made the deck a lot more consistent going first in a good amount of matchups that just didn't super want to go second. So with all that gone, how is the deck still good? Of course, decks are only good relevant to the meta because you have to be able to beat what is meta in order to do well. And currently, I feel like the meta is situated quite well for Miraidon. Of course, the biggest thing about Miraidon is it is, in my opinion, the best way to use Iron Hands EX. The Ampy Very Much attack, getting an extra prize card, is of course huge, and right now there's a lot of evolution-based decks that can kind of struggle to set up if you are able to take the prize race in your advantage because of those 2 prize knockouts that were ordinarily 1 prize knockouts, like on Bidoof and Ralts and other different setup Pokemon. It is of course the strength of the card in general, right? But having those electric generators for a turn 1 attack is really nice because the other main ways to use Iron Hands right now are with the Joltik deck to accelerate energy onto the Iron Hands for a turn 2 attack, or of course the Future Box deck, which does a similar thing with the Baby Miraidon, just accelerating energy onto Iron Hands and then boosting up the energy with the other future Pokemon. However, I still think Miraidon is better than those because you get way more Pokemon just on your bench, right? You have the ability to use the Magnetons for the energy acceleration, the Magnemites for acceleration if you miss your turn 1 attack and you have to, let's say, Squawkabilly discarding your hand to draw 6, you don't see what you need, you motivate and get those energy back onto Miraidon, which is similar to the other slower versions of the deck, but also the fact that you can get multiple electric generators if you go second on the turn 1, get a first attack off. That is absolutely huge, shutting off potential Bidoof plays, any TM Evo things because you're going second so they can't do it immediately, and that just gives you more opportunities to get your Ampy Very Muches multiple times. A card that actually helps a lot with consistency that I didn't know existed because I'm still relatively new to the game is Heavy Baton, which allows you to transfer your energy off of a KO'd Iron Hands, like your first Iron Hands essentially, onto another Pokemon, whether that is a Miraidon for a closing out of the game on like a Pheasantipity with the 210 HP, because Miraidon has that 220 damage attack, or a second Iron Hands, you attach 1 energy to it, and then you are good to go with your Ampy Very Muches. And of course, as I mentioned, the deck is mostly good because it is, in my opinion, pretty good against the meta, but let's look at a deck list real quick. So this is the list that I'm currently running. Of course, things can change, right? But basically it's 2 Miraidon, 2 Iron Hands EX because you want to not prize both of them. The amount of times I've been playing on TCG Live and I actually do prize both of them is crazy. 2 Magnemite, 2 Magneton because that's going to be a main way to accelerate energy later in the game if you don't get the Heavy Baton off because they kill your Iron Hands with something that isn't just their attack. The Iron Thorns, 1 can shut down the abilities and just win certain matchups on its own, but of course the main thing is just getting through the walls type decks decks because it can shut off all the wall abilities and then just smack it. Of course, you have the Future Booster Capsule to kind of help it not get stuck in the active, and it can also help with Ampy very much damage in a couple of situations, like against Pidgeot. You can actually get super effective damage on the Ampy very much, doing 280 damage and actually taking a 3-prize knockout, which is nice. It can also just fix a couple of numbers on Iron Hands for sure. And the ace spec of this build is going to be the Prime Catcher, because the main thing you are doing in this build is just gusting every single turn. You set up a single Iron Hands turn 1 and then gust, whether that's with Iron Bundle, Prime Catcher, or the 4 bosses orders we are running to just get the Pokemon we want active. We have draw support with Mew and Fezandipity. We have a late game attacker with the Ursaluna because of that seasoned skill ability, which allows you to just attack for basically no energy or a single energy. I put in a single Levincia. I changed the Azul build a little bit because this is what I based it off of, is Azul GG's list. I added a Levincia, not necessarily because I want its ability, although it is probably the best one we can do, just in case late game you don't have an energy in your hand to attach to something like an Iron Thorns, or you're short in energy for a Blood Moon Ursaluna attack, but it's mostly just as a counter stadium so you can get off things like Artisan or Jamming Tower, considering we run 5 different tools. I thought that was pretty important. You also have the Counter Catcher for gusting, because you can oftentimes put yourself on odd prizes because you yourself are going to be knocking out your Magnetons for the energy acceleration. But yeah, currently I just think this deck is quite strong. I played it at a local. I didn't top 8, but that was because honestly I misplayed, and I also got very lucky with, like, literally I went 3-3 in the 3 games I lost were strictly because Electric Generator did not hit. Like, it hit 0 a couple times, it needed to hit 1, and that was a bit unlucky because welcome to playing Miraidon and Electric Generator. Sometimes you are just going to lose with that, seeing the top 5 cards and adding the electric energy to your Pokemon. Sometimes it's just not going to work. But now, even given that, I do want to go over the top decks currently of the format so we can talk about why I think Miraidon does well, which is the fact that I think it does well versus all of the main decks. So first off, a lot of people are running Dragapult with no Dusknoir, which I think is a fantastic matchup. They don't run the rare candy to get the fast Dragapult attacks. They're relying on Budew to slow you down. But again, if Miraidon either goes second or gets a single generator for 2 with a manual attach onto Iron Hands turn 1 into another Iron Hands attach turn 2, you are going to be setting up Budew 2 KO, like 2 prize KOs, which is really nice. Again, they do not have a way to get Dragapult very quickly, which means you are easily going to be taking 4 knockouts immediately before any Dragapult is coming out to attack, and then all you need is a single gust to basically close out the game on a Fezandipity, or you set up a second Iron Hands because of the heavy baton and knock out a Monkey Dory. There are so many things to basically just make this deck very easy to do, and once you set up your Iron Hands, you don't need to worry about Unfair Stamp necessarily, because you're just going to go, okay, you can just Miraidon for more Iron Hands just to make sure you have it for the baton, and then you are able to just set up multiple 2 prize KOs with that Amp You Very Much attack, and it is so just good in my opinion. It's really good into the slow Pult. I will say it is a little bit worse into the Dragapult Dusknoir build because they are able to do big damage and also take knockouts on your Pokemon that have heavy batons, so you aren't actually going to get that energy transfer because it has to be from the direct attack. But at the same time, that's more 2 prize liabilities, right? You're knocking out the Duskulls, you're knocking out the Budews, you're knocking out the Draclotes, and just doing one of those, like each of those once in a game is again going to be enough to amp you very much for victory. The Howlucha is always a liability, and then of course you are still able to just Miraidon and take out Fezandipity, or just set up a 2-turn KO on Dragapult, assuming that they don't run the Professor Turos, which if we're looking at Andrew Hedrick's build, he doesn't run that, so it's always going to be nice. I personally don't really like this matchup, just because I don't have a lot of success with it, but everyone tells me I'm crazy for not liking it, so I'm just going to assume that I'm wrong and bad, and that the deck is fine with it. Next up, we do have Goldengo, and honestly, in my opinion, this is an incredibly even matchup because I just feel like you're just taking 2 prize KOs back and forth. You know, Miraidon will be taking the first prize typically on a Gimme Ghoul with an Amp You Very Much. If they don't immediately have Energy Surge Pro to take a return KO, you basically win. But if they do, again, your Heavy Baton will switch to a different Pokemon. You are able to also Iron Thorns to slow down the draw support of Goldengo and Fezandipity, which is very nice. Or again, you just like snipe different Gimme Ghouls. You snipe the Iron Bundles, you snipe the Fezandipity with Miraidon. I think it's a very even matchup. It's kind of just is who draws better, which in a TCG, that's kind of all you can ask for. One of the most important things about why I think Miraidon is so good specifically is so many decks are running the Hoot Hoot Noctowl engine with the Terra Pokemon, because of course that Jewel Seeker ability is insane, being able to search for 2 items if you have a Terra Pokemon in play, but it is weak to Electric, so basically the entire game you will have abilities to gust up opponent's Pokemon with Boss's Orders or Counter Catcher or Prime Catcher and get 2 prize knockouts for basically the entire game, because these type of decks cannot afford to not go for those Pokemon, because that's how the entire engine works. You need to be searching your Crispins, you need to be searching your Bravery Charms, your Glass Trumpets, your Area Zeros. You need to be doing that, and the fact that we can just go, okay, knock it out, is a huge deal. And of course, one big thing is if you put a Bravery Charm giving 50 extra HP to your Iron Hands, there is no way for this deck to knock it out in one hit, because the maximum damage that this deck can do, as far as I'm aware, unless I'm wrong, but I'm looking at it and I'm not, is 240 damage, with this Terrapagos attack being 30 damage per benched Pokemon. You can have a maximum of 8 because of this Area Zero right here, so that's 240. If you have a Bravery Charm, that is going to be great. So your first Iron Hands, you typically set up with that Heavy Baton, getting hopefully 1 or 2 knockouts. You set up the second one with a Bravery Charm, and then you are doing big damage, even though the Bouffalant, of course, can reduce the damage to the Terrapagos. Again, most of the time, you are expecting to gust anyway, because if you ever go down in prizes or an odd prize race because you knock out your own Magneton, you can Arven for a Counter Catcher, get a Noctowl. You can Arven for a Prime Catcher. If you just raw draw the Boss's Orders, you are fine with that, and I think this matchup is quite good. And again, there are still things to snipe like the Mew, Clefairy, and Latias with just straight up Miraidon's 220 damage, so that is going to be perfectly fine. And again, we're typically not leaving damage on board, so things like Monkey Dory aren't going to be as big of a deal. Next up, we have Gardevoir, which obviously lost some power in the rotation as well, losing Refinement Kirlia, so it lost its draw engine a little bit. Of course, we saw Henry Chow use Zoroark to kind of get it back, which is super nice with the trade ability, discarding a card and then drawing 2, which is very, very cool. But again, this deck, in my opinion, just tries to stall you with 1 prize attackers, or, you know, try to get ahead on the prize race because they're killing you with a 1 prize attacker of Screamtail, or a 1 prize attacker with Drifloon or Badoo to stall you. But that doesn't really work against Miraidon, because you simply amp you very much everything, and so it feels really good, and they have to do very specific things in order to get enough damage to actually KO you in a single hit in return. So it just feels incredibly it just feels really favored for Miraidon. So we have so far, in my opinion, like a favored matchup with Slowpolt, a favored matchup with Gardevoir, a favored matchup with the Terra decks, and I didn't even go over Terra Box, but I also think Miraidon's good because it wasn't technically top 6. And then we have 2 even matchups with Dragapult Dusknoir and of course the Goldengo, but again, I think those are perfectly doable. I don't think they're losing. Next up, we have Archaladon, which has been seeing the most success with the poison package, with the Pecharon, Brute Bonnet, poisoning your Pokemon and getting extra damage, hoping for turn 1 KOs before your opponent even goes. But a lot of the basics that Miraidon has are basic EX Pokemon, like that Miraidon, like that Iron Hands, which have enough health that you're not getting poison donked basically at all. Again, there are smaller Pokemon, so you can snipe them, like the Pecharon EX. They're going to have to use Squawk ability to make sure that they can get the discards you want, so that's a 3 prize KO here. So a 3 prize KO, a 2 prize KO, and then literally KOing anything else. You are able to knock out Duraludon's 130 HP with a future booster capsule on that Iron Hands, which is going to be, again, a big deal. You're able to snipe the Latias and the Pecharunt and the Pheasantipede with Miraidon, so I feel like this matchup, again, feels totally fine. They are able to get bigger damage, and they are able to set up poison so that not necessarily your Iron Hands will be able to use the Heavy Baton, but you just put a Bravery Charm on it, and you feel fine. And again, if you are going for a 2-2-2 type of prize race, I still feel like Miraidon is fine in that aspect, because oftentimes you can get, honestly, a 3 prize KO on a Squawk ability. If they have to slow down a turn with Badoo, you have the ability to amp you very much that as well. There's just a lot of targets for Miraidon to go after. And of course, there are different builds of Archaladon. There's the Dubwool build, which is of course trying to gust you with the Hops Dubwool ability. When it evolves, it is able to essentially Boss's Orders your Pokemon. But again, that is just more targets for Ampy very much. So I just feel like it is totally fine. And then I think Raging Bolt, you know, I feel like slow Raging Bolt, or like old Raging Bolt, wasn't the best. It felt like a very 50-50 matchup, because it was literally just like, who goes second, that's going to win the entire game, because, you know, we're both taking 2 prize knockouts. But again, because a lot of Raging Bolt is currently running the Noctowl build, again, as I talked about in the Terrapagos, deck, you have a lot of ways to get 2 prize knockouts no matter what is happening on these Noctowls, these Hoothoots, these Fanrotoms. Again, you are able to do 220 damage on Ogerpons. Again, Raging Bolts, if you have the future booster capsule on your Iron Hands, you are able to get 2 prize knockouts here as well. And then of course they need a bunch of support Pokemon, and and again, you are just able to take them all out with Miraidon. And the thing is, if you go first, you just end up sending a Magnemite to your front or some one prize Pokemon. I don't know if other builds of Miraidon are using things that aren't Magnemite as one prizes, but you send those up so that even if they do get a turn 1 knockout, you know, they take one prize and then you're going to return it with an Ampy very much, typically the next turn, and then be able to take 2 on a Fanrotom or on a Hoot that you want to boss up, and then you are still going to be ahead basically the entire game. Like, I know at Atlanta, Miraidon did not see a lot of play, and there was not a single player that made day 2, because I think there was only like 20 people that brought the deck out of like 2,000 or something like that, but I do think the deck is actually quite good in this format, and I hope people give it a chance, because I feel like, honestly, the deck that it does the worst against of all of these, because at the moment I'm really struggling to think of what this deck does bad against, right? I feel like if you think about Eevee Box, you still have all of those Fanrotoms and the Hoots, so you're able to get 2 prize knockouts there. They don't really care that much about Angelite for the Sylveon attacks, putting 2 benched Pokemon back into the deck, because you just tutor them out with Miraidon, or then they put the Miraidon back and you nest ball for Miraidon and then you get them back out, so you're able to replenish your bench very easily. Terra Box, I think, is a fine matchup because, again, you are able to knock out all of the birds and Fanrotom, and of course you were able to get 2 prize knockouts onto Wellspring Ogerpon very easily because of that 210 HP. Thank you very much, doing 240 because it's super effective. And again, there's nothing with a lot of HP in that deck, so Miraidon is actually able to do good specifically as an attacker because it can knock out anything in basically one hit. Like, I'm sure there are some more like not super top decks that are decent versus Miraidon. I know if you go like straight Archaladon, sometimes that can be pretty annoying for Miraidon, but people aren't really doing that nowadays. So again, if the meta changes, maybe Miraidon will see a drop, but I feel like it does well versus basically all of meta, and I don't really know what it loses to besides bad luck, which, welcome to card games. If you lose to bad luck, that's not really that big of a deal. But yeah, let me know down in the comments what you think, because I think Miraidon has a really good shot of being good in this format. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Also, let me know if I edited this one better, because I'm trying to put more cards on the screen so you can understand exactly what I'm talking about, because I know a lot of my audience is not Pokemon players. So I hope if you watched it, it was better. Let me know in the comments how that went. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Peace.